The hum of keyboards and the muted buzz of phones filled the opulent conference room of Whitman Enterprises, a tech behemoth rapidly gaining prominence on the West Coast. Framed awards adorned the walls, their polished glass catching the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Around the massive oak table, a group of executives debated fiercely, their voices tinged with urgency as they reviewed the company's plans for the next quarter. Near the corner of the room, Diana Moore, a middle-aged black woman wearing a crisp blue uniform, moved with practiced efficiency. Her job was simple, yet essential, keeping the executive floor spotless. Today, her task was to clear empty coffee cups and wipe down surfaces without interrupting the meeting. Though her presence was silent, her dignity radiated in every deliberate movement. Yet, like countless times before, her dignity went unnoticed. As Diana leaned over to pick up a cup, the ambitious and sharp-tongued Mark Steele, a young sales manager with a penchant for snide remarks, noticed her. A smirk curled his lips. "You know," he began, his voice dripping with mockery, "maybe we should get Diana's opinion on this. She's the expert in cleaning up our messes after all." The room erupted in hesitant laughter. Some chuckled outright, while others glanced uncomfortably at Diana, unsure of how to react. Diana paused, her dark eyes flickering to Mark for a moment. There was no anger, no visible hurt, just a calm, unreadable expression. Without a word, she returned to her work, ignoring the heat of the stares that briefly turned her way. Mark, pleased with himself, leaned back in his chair, clearly oblivious to the weight of his comment. His smugness filled the air as he continued leading the discussion on sales forecasts. Diana, meanwhile, finished cleaning the room and quietly exited, her presence quickly forgotten by those inside. What none of them knew, what would soon shake their confidence to the core, was the truth about Diana. She wasn't just the cleaning lady. She was married to Jonathan Moore, the enigmatic and brilliant CEO who had single-handedly built Whitman Enterprises from the ground up. Jonathan, a man known for his keen intellect and no-nonsense demeanor, rarely attended routine meetings like this. He preferred to focus on innovation and strategy, trusting his leadership team to handle the day-to-day operations. Diana had her own reasons for working as a cleaner, even after years of marriage to one of the wealthiest men in the industry. Humility had been a cornerstone of her upbringing, instilled by parents who valued honest work over appearances. While Jonathan admired her decision to keep working, he often worried about how she was treated. Diana had assured him time and again, "This work grounds me. It reminds me of where I came from, and I see more of the world than you think from my corner of the room." Still, Jonathan never ignored her subtle hints about disrespect she occasionally endured. Today, as fate would have it, was a day neither Diana nor the executive team would forget. Down the hall, in his private office, Jonathan was wrapping up a meeting with key investors. The company's future looked bright, and he was eager to introduce a new initiative that would revolutionize their core product line. Part of that plan required a leadership restructuring, and Jonathan had decided to personally attend a sales meeting to announce the changes. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, the discussion grew increasingly tense. Mark, emboldened by his earlier comment, dominated the conversation with flashy slides and inflated numbers. Other executives, clearly tired of his antics, exchanged glances but said nothing. Just as Mark finished another boastful statement, the door opened. Heads turned as Jonathan entered, his presence commanding immediate respect. Dressed in a tailored suit, his sharp eyes scanned the room, quickly taking in the dynamics. A few executives shifted nervously in their seats. Jonathan wasn't known for attending these meetings, and when he did, it often meant big news or major changes. Jonathan's gaze landed briefly on the coffee cup Mark had pushed aside during his presentation. Diana had likely cleaned up similar messes earlier. The sight sparked a thought, but he kept his expression neutral as he greeted the team. "Good morning, everyone," Jonathan began, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "I've been reviewing our recent performance, and there's a lot to discuss. But first, I want to address something more personal." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Jonathan continued, "Many of you know I value respect and humility as core tenets of this company. It's not just about how we treat clients or investors. It's about how we treat each other, at every level." Mark shifted uncomfortably, sensing an undertone in Jonathan's words. "And speaking of respect," Jonathan added, his tone sharpening, I'd like to introduce you all to someone who embodies it better than anyone in this room. My wife, Diana Moore. Gasps echoed through the room as Diana stepped in behind him, her uniform still immaculate, her posture as poised as ever. The executives, including Mark, stared in stunned silence, their faces a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and disbelief. Jonathan's expression remained firm. Diana chose to work here, not because she needed to, but because she believes in the dignity of honest work. She's seen and heard more in this room than you realize, and I trust her insights more than any slide deck or sales pitch. Mark's face turned pale as he realized the implications of his earlier comment. Jonathan's sharp gaze landed squarely on him. Respect is earned through actions, not titles. I suggest you all take a moment to reflect on how you've acted today. The silence in the room was deafening. The aftermath of Jonathan's revelation rippled through the conference room, like a stone dropped into still water. Every executive sat frozen in their chairs, their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the weight of their embarrassment. Diana stood silently beside her husband, her gaze steady, revealing nothing of the emotions brewing inside her. Jonathan, however, wasn't done. "Before we move on to the company updates, I want to make something clear," he said, his tone firm yet composed. "Diana doesn't need my protection, but she deserves my respect, and yours. That respect isn't negotiable, whether it's for her or any other employee in this building." The tension was palpable. Mark Steele, who had been riding high just moments ago, now looked like a balloon deflated of its air. His earlier smugness was replaced with a look of desperation as he tried to avoid Diana's gaze. After a long pause, Jonathan softened his tone slightly, though his authority remained intact. "Now let's move forward. Diana and I will be staying for the rest of this meeting. I'm here to ensure that our focus is on the future of Whitman Enterprises, and that we uphold the values that brought us this far." As Jonathan took his seat, Diana moved to a quieter corner of the room, not to clean this time, but to observe. The sudden shift in dynamics made her presence more noticeable than ever. Executives who had barely acknowledged her before now seemed hyper-aware of her quiet scrutiny, realizing how much she had seen and heard over the years. Mark Steele fidgeted in his seat. His mind raced with excuses, strategies to recover, or ways to redirect attention from himself, but nothing came. He knew he had crossed a line that couldn't be erased with smooth talking or data-heavy slides. The meeting resumed, but the usual rhythm was off. Jonathan's presence cast a heavy shadow, and Diana's quiet dignity served as an unspoken reminder of the humility that many in the room lacked. As the discussion continued, Diana allowed her mind to wander briefly. Her journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Born in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, she had been raised by parents who taught her the value of hard work. Her mother, a nurse, and her father, a mechanic, had instilled in her the belief that no job was beneath anyone who worked with integrity. When she met Jonathan in college, he had been a dreamer with big ideas and a bigger heart. They had struggled together in the early years, juggling odd jobs while Jonathan built the framework for what would eventually become Whitman Enterprises. Diana had supported him at every turn, not just as a wife, but as a partner in his vision. Even when Jonathan achieved success, Diana insisted on staying grounded. While others might have embraced a life of luxury, she found fulfillment in work that kept her connected to the world. Cleaning wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And in the sterile, high-powered halls of Whitman Enterprises, Diana saw more than just dirt and coffee stains. She saw people's true characters. Back in the conference room, Diana's presence began to inspire quiet introspection among the executives. Some, like Linda Chu, the VP of Operations, felt a pang of guilt. Linda had always been polite to Diana but had never gone out of her way to acknowledge her. Watching Diana now, standing tall beside Jonathan, Linda realized how much she had overlooked. Others, like Peter Hansen, the CFO, admired Diana's grace but struggled to reconcile it with his own biases. Peter had grown up in a corporate culture that valued appearances and status. Diana's story challenged everything he thought he knew about success and respect. Then there was Mark. His discomfort grew with every passing minute, and when Jonathan directed a question about sales projections to him, his usual confidence faltered. The words stumbled out of his mouth, devoid of their usual swagger. Jonathan's emphasis on respect wasn't just personal, it was cultural. Whitman Enterprises had been built on a foundation of diversity and inclusion, principles that Jonathan and Diana had both deeply believed in from the start. But as the company grew, those values sometimes got lost in the hustle for profits and prestige. Diana's decision to work in such a visible, yet easily overlooked role was her quiet way of keeping those principles alive. She observed how executives treated those they deemed less important, and she often relayed her observations to Jonathan, helping him identify cracks in the company's culture. As the meeting continued, Diana's role shifted from passive observer to silent catalyst. Every executive in the room began to weigh their words more carefully, their actions more deliberately. They knew that Jonathan's respect for Diana wasn't just personal. It reflected his broader expectations for how every employee should be treated, regardless of their title. When the meeting ended, Jonathan stood and addressed the room one final time. "Thank you for your time today. I hope this serves as a reminder that our success isn't just measured by numbers, but by the culture we create. Treat people with respect, not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do." As the executives filed out, Diana caught Mark Steele glancing at her nervously. She met his gaze with quiet strength, then turned to leave with Jonathan by her side. In that moment, Diana's role as the cleaning lady took on a new meaning. She wasn't just cleaning rooms. She was quietly cleaning up the company's culture, one interaction at a time. After the meeting, word spread quickly through Whitman Enterprises. The revelation that Diana Moore, the unassuming cleaning lady, was married to the CEO became the topic of hushed conversations across all departments. For many, it was a moment of reckoning. Employees who had ignored or underestimated her found themselves reevaluating their actions and attitudes. For Diana, however, life continued much as before. The next morning, she arrived on the executive floor at her usual time, her uniform crisp and her demeanor calm. Despite the buzz surrounding her, she moved through the hallways with the same quiet dignity, ignoring the sideways glances and sudden smiles from those who had previously overlooked her. Mark Steele, on the other hand, wasn't handling the fallout as gracefully. His confidence had been shattered by Jonathan's reprimand, and the memory of Diana's composed yet piercing gaze lingered in his mind. At his desk, he drafted an email to Jonathan, apologizing profusely for his behavior. He agonized over every word, unsure if it would even make a difference. But Mark's unease wasn't just guilt, it was fear. He had built his career on bravado, relying on charm and sharp wit to climb the corporate ladder. Now he worried his position might be at risk. After all, he hadn't just insulted a colleague, he had publicly humiliated the CEO's wife. Jonathan, meanwhile, had no immediate plans to fire Mark. Instead, he saw the incident as an opportunity to address deeper issues within the company's culture. That afternoon, he called an emergency meeting with the executive team, including Diana. In the sleek boardroom, Jonathan opened the meeting with a direct question. "How many of you know the names of the people who keep this building running every day?" The executives exchanged uneasy glances. A few muttered names, but most remained silent. Jonathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's what I thought. We've built a company that prides itself on innovation and excellence, but somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of the people who make that excellence possible." Turning to Diana, Jonathan continued, "My wife has worked here for years. She's seen the best and worst of this company, and she shared her observations with me. Today, I'd like her to share them with you." Diana hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. Her voice was steady but carried the weight of her experiences. "I've watched how some of you treat people who don't sit at this table. You're polite when you need something but dismissive when you don't. Respect isn't a performance, it's a practice. And if this company is going to grow, it needs to practice respect at every level." Her words struck a chord. The executives listened intently, their faces a mix of guilt and determination. For many, it was a wake-up call they hadn't realized they needed. Later that week, Mark Steele approached Diana in the break room. He looked uneasy, holding a cup of coffee as if it were a shield. "Mrs. Moore," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said. It was wrong, and I wasn't thinking." Diana regarded him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I appreciate your apology, Mark, but words are easy. Change is harder. Let's see if you're willing to do the work." Mark nodded, understanding the challenge in her words. Over the next few weeks, he made a conscious effort to shift his behavior. He started learning the names of the janitorial staff and took time to acknowledge their contributions. Though some dismissed his actions as an attempt to save face, Diana recognized the sincerity in his efforts. Jonathan and Diana's actions sparked a broader cultural shift within Whitman Enterprises. New training programs emphasized respect and inclusion, and employees at all levels were encouraged to share their perspectives. A weekly employee spotlight newsletter featured stories of unsung heroes within the company, from IT technicians to cafeteria workers. Diana continued her work, but her presence carried new weight. She became a quiet symbol of the company's renewed commitment to its values. Employees who once ignored her now greeted her warmly, not out of obligation but genuine respect. Even Mark, who had been the catalyst for this change, found himself transformed. His bravado was replaced with humility, and his relationships with colleagues deepened as he learned to lead with empathy rather than ego. Not everyone embraced the change. A handful of executives resisted, grumbling about woke policies and questioning Diana's influence. Among them was Elliot Carr, the VP of Business Development. Elliot had always viewed himself as a traditionalist and saw the new initiatives as a distraction from the company's primary goals. Elliot's resentment grew as Diana's presence became more prominent. He began subtly undermining her influence, planting doubts among other executives and questioning the validity of her observations. Jonathan noticed Elliot's behavior but chose to address it indirectly. During a leadership retreat, he presented data showing that companies with inclusive cultures outperformed their competitors. Respect isn't just a moral imperative, it's a business strategy, Jonathan stated, locking eyes with Elliot. The message was clear, but the tension between Elliot and Diana remained unresolved, setting the stage for future challenges. The cultural shift within Whitman Enterprises wasn't without its growing pains. While many employees embraced the changes, others found themselves wrestling with long-held biases. Diana's presence as both a cleaning staff member and the CEO's wife became a focal point of discussion, admiration, and, in some cases, resentment. Among those who struggled most was Elliot Carr, the VP of Business Development. Though outwardly cordial, Elliot viewed the recent initiatives as distractions from real work. His dissatisfaction simmered beneath the surface, manifesting in passive-aggressive comments during meetings and resistance to Jonathan's new policies. Diana, ever observant, noticed Elliot's behavior but chose not to address it directly. She believed actions spoke louder than words and trusted that Jonathan's leadership would expose those unwilling to adapt. Meanwhile, Diana's quiet influence continued to ripple across the company. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life earned her a unique position within Whitman Enterprises. Employees who had once dismissed her as a background figure now sought her out for advice, sharing their thoughts and concerns about the company's culture. One such employee was Maria Alvarez, a young intern in the marketing department. Maria confided in Diana about her struggles navigating the high-pressure environment. "Sometimes it feels like no one takes me seriously because I'm just an intern," Maria admitted during a chance encounter in the break room. Diana smiled gently. "I know that feeling," she said, "but respect doesn't always come right away. You have to show them who you are, not just with words but with how you carry yourself. And remember, the people who overlook you now will remember you later." Inspired by Diana's words, Maria began contributing more confidently during team meetings. Her ideas, once brushed aside, started gaining traction, eventually catching Jonathan's attention. Recognizing Maria's potential, Jonathan offered her a mentorship opportunity, setting her on a path to success within the company. While Diana's influence grew, Elliot Carr's frustrations deepened. He began planting seeds of doubt among his peers, suggesting that Jonathan's focus on soft issues was distracting from the company's bottom line. "All this talk about inclusion is great," Elliot said during one meeting, "but at the end of the day, we need results. Are we prioritizing values over profitability?" Jonathan, aware of Elliot's dissent, decided to address it head-on during a quarterly leadership review. He presented data showing improved employee retention rates, higher satisfaction scores, and increased productivity since implementing the new initiatives. "These aren't distractions," Jonathan said firmly. "They're the foundation of our long-term success. If anyone disagrees, I welcome an open conversation. Elliot didn't respond, but his clenched jaw betrayed his frustration. As Whitman Enterprises continued its transformation, an external challenge emerged. A major competitor, Atlas Dynamics, launched a groundbreaking product that threatened to overshadow Whitman's upcoming release. The executive team scrambled to reassess their strategy, with tensions running high as deadlines loomed. Jonathan, recognizing the pressure on his team, called a series of brainstorming sessions to foster collaboration. Diana, though not directly involved, observed the stress building among the employees and quietly stepped in where she could. She left handwritten notes of encouragement on desks, brought coffee to late-night meetings, and listened to employees who felt overwhelmed. Her small acts of kindness didn't go unnoticed. Employees began to see her not just as the CEO's wife or a cleaning staff member, but as a pillar of the company's evolving culture. Elliot, feeling sidelined during the product crisis, saw an opportunity to regain control. He proposed an aggressive marketing campaign that prioritized short-term gains over the company's values. "This is what we need to beat Atlas Dynamics," he argued during a heated meeting. Jonathan listened carefully, but ultimately rejected the proposal. "We can't compromise who we are for a quick win," he said. "Our values are what set us apart, and they're what will sustain us in the long run." Elliot's frustration boiled over. "With all due respect, Jonathan, not everyone agrees with your vision. Some of us think these changes are weakening the company." The room fell silent. Jonathan's gaze was steady as he responded. "If anyone here believes that, they're welcome to leave. But understand this, Whitman Enterprises isn't just a company. It's a reflection of the people who built it, and I won't let anyone undermine that." The tension was palpable, and though Elliot didn't say another word, it was clear the divide between him and Jonathan had reached a critical point. After the meeting, Diana found Jonathan in his office, his usual calm demeanor replaced with visible frustration. "You handled that well," she said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Jonathan sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm pushing too hard. Not everyone's ready for change." Diana smiled. "Change isn't about everyone being ready. It's about showing them why it matters. And you've done that, whether they admit it or not." Her words reignited his resolve. Together they prepared for the challenges ahead, knowing that their commitment to the company's values would be tested again. As pressure mounted at Whitman Enterprises, an unexpected event pushed the company and its leadership into uncharted territory. A whistleblower from Atlas Dynamics, their fiercest competitor, leaked documents exposing unethical practices within their operations. The revelations gave Whitman Enterprises an edge in public perception, but they also brought intense scrutiny to all tech companies, including Jonathan's. The media storm put every aspect of Whitman Enterprises under a microscope. News outlets began digging into the company's internal culture, questioning whether it lived up to the values it promoted. Diana's story, once confined to office gossip, became a focal point in the narrative. "She's the CEO's wife and works as a cleaner. Why?" one journalist asked during an interview with Jonathan. His response was measured but passionate. "Because she believes in the dignity of work no matter the job. And I support her because she's a better leader than most executives I've ever met." The public reaction to Jonathan's statement was overwhelmingly positive, but it also fueled internal tensions. Elliot Carr saw the media attention as a threat. To him, the focus on Diana's role overshadowed the company's strategic efforts and made it appear soft. Privately, he began lobbying other executives to join him in questioning Jonathan's leadership. Elliot's opportunity came sooner than expected. During an all-hands meeting, an anonymous employee submitted a question that was read aloud. "How does the company plan to address the power dynamics between executive leadership and regular employees? Are initiatives like this just for show?" Jonathan began to answer, but Elliot interjected. "It's a valid question," he said, his voice cool. "We talk about inclusion, but are we creating real opportunities for advancement? Or are we just showcasing select individuals to appear progressive?" The room went still. The implication hung heavy in the air. Elliot wasn't just questioning the company's values. He was questioning Diana's role as a symbol of those values. Diana, who had been sitting quietly in the audience, stood up. All eyes turned to her as she walked to the front of the room. She didn't speak immediately, but instead looked around at the faces in the room. "When I started here," she began, her voice steady. "I chose to take a job that many people overlook because I believe that how you treat the so-called invisible people says everything about your character. What I've seen at Whitman Enterprises is that most of you understand this, but not all." Her eyes briefly landed on Elliot before she continued. "This company isn't about appearances. It's about impact. And if anyone doubts that, they're welcome to step aside and let others lead by example." The room erupted in applause, and Elliot's expression hardened. His grip on the room was slipping, and he knew it. Elliot, desperate to regain control, made a bold move. He leaked internal documents to the press, painting a misleading picture of favoritism and inconsistency in Whitman Enterprises' practices. The report suggested that Jonathan had used company resources to elevate Diana's story for publicity purposes, a claim designed to undermine their credibility. When the story broke, the backlash was immediate. Social media exploded with debates. Employees whispered in hallways, and shareholders demanded answers. Jonathan and Diana were caught off guard by the betrayal, but they knew they had to act quickly. Jonathan called an emergency press conference. Standing beside him, Diana addressed the allegations directly. "I didn't ask for this attention," she said. "I came to work every day to do my job, just like anyone else here. The values of this company are real, and I've seen them in action. This isn't about me, it's about all of us choosing to do better." Jonathan followed her speech with evidence disproving the claims, exposing Elliot's actions in the process. The fallout was swift. Elliot was dismissed from the company, and his attempts to tarnish Whitman Enterprises' reputation only solidified Jonathan and Diana's leadership in the public eye. The crisis marked a turning point for Whitman Enterprises. The company doubled down on its commitment to transparency and inclusion, introducing new policies to ensure accountability at all levels. Diana, at Jonathan's encouragement, began speaking at company events, sharing her insights on leadership and humility. One of her first initiatives was a mentorship program that paired executives with employees from all departments, breaking down the barriers that had once divided them. Mark Steele was one of the first to sign up. Paired with Maria Alvarez, the young intern Diana had inspired, Mark found himself learning as much as he taught. The experience humbled him further, solidifying his transformation from a brash opportunist to a thoughtful leader. In the months following Elliot's dismissal, Whitman Enterprises flourished. The public rallied behind the company's values, and their innovative product launch outpaced Atlas Dynamics. More importantly, the employees felt a renewed sense of pride and unity, inspired by the leadership of Jonathan and Diana. Though Diana continued her work as a cleaner, her role within the company had transformed. She wasn't just a figure of respect, she was a living reminder of what the company stood for. And while she never sought the spotlight, her actions spoke volumes, changing the culture of Whitman Enterprises from the inside out. The impact of Elliot's betrayal lingered within Whitman Enterprises, even after his departure. Employees who had once admired his sharp business acumen found themselves grappling with disappointment and mistrust. For Jonathan and Diana, the incident highlighted the delicate balance of leading with values in a competitive, high-stakes industry. Diana, however, refused to let the negativity overshadow the progress being made. Her resolve strengthened as employees from all levels of the company began to share their stories of personal growth and renewed pride in their work. One evening, while making her usual rounds on the executive floor, she was approached by Sarah Lynn, a longtime administrative assistant who had worked under Elliot. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said hesitantly, clutching a folder to her chest, "for standing up for all of us. I think I stayed quiet too long when I saw things I didn't agree with. But seeing you speak out, well, it reminded me that silence isn't always the safest choice." Diana gave Sarah an encouraging smile. "It's never too late to start speaking up. The important thing is that you do." The mentorship program Diana helped establish became a cornerstone of Whitman Enterprises' new culture. Employees from all departments began connecting in ways they hadn't before, bridging gaps between executives, interns, and support staff. Maria Alvarez, the former intern who had been paired with Mark Steele, flourished under his guidance. Her innovative ideas for digital marketing campaigns not only boosted the company's sales, but also demonstrated the power of collaboration. "I used to think no one would take me seriously here," Maria admitted during a company-wide presentation. But mentorship taught me that everyone has something to contribute if we're willing to listen. Mark, humbled by Maria's success, addressed the room with newfound sincerity. She taught me more than I ever taught her, he said. The audience erupted in applause, recognizing the profound shift in Mark's demeanor. Diana's decision to remain in her cleaning role puzzled some employees, even as she became a celebrated figure within the company. One day, during a casual conversation in the cafeteria, a young software engineer named Kevin Price couldn't resist asking, "Mrs. Moore, with everything you've done for the company, why do you still work as a cleaner? You could easily do anything else, or nothing at all." Diana's warm laugh caught him off guard. "Because this is where I see the real people," she said. "From this vantage point, I hear things others don't. I see the cracks before they become breaks. It reminds me that every part of this company is important, not just the shiny parts at the top." Kevin nodded thoughtfully, her words resonating with him long after the conversation ended. Despite the positive changes, some employees still harbored doubts. The fallout from Elliot's actions had left a scar, and rebuilding trust required more than policies or speeches. Jonathan understood this and made it a point to hold open forums where employees could voice their concerns directly. During one such forum, Andrew Klein, a mid-level manager, stood up. "How do we know this isn't just another phase?" he asked, his tone respectful but pointed. "We've seen leadership initiatives come and go before. What makes this different?" Jonathan didn't hesitate. "What makes this different," he said, "is accountability. We're not asking for blind trust. We're showing our work. Every policy, every decision, every promotion will reflect the values we've committed to. And if we fail, we want you to hold us accountable." Diana chimed in, her voice calm but resolute. "Change doesn't happen overnight. It happens one action at a time, and it takes all of us. If we want this to last, we have to hold each other accountable, not just leadership, but ourselves." Andrew nodded, visibly reassured. His question had sparked a meaningful conversation, one that inspired others to share their own thoughts and ideas. As Whitman Enterprises continued to evolve, Diana's story became a powerful symbol both inside and outside the company. Industry leaders praised the company for its commitment to values, while employees felt a renewed sense of purpose. One of the most significant moments came during an industry conference where Jonathan and Diana were invited to speak. Jonathan discussed the company's innovative strategies, but it was Diana's speech that stole the show. Standing before a packed audience, she spoke about resilience. "We all want to make a difference," she said, "but making a difference starts with how we treat the people around us, every single day. It's not about grand gestures or big titles. It's about showing up, doing the work, and lifting others as you climb." Her words earned a standing ovation, and attendees later described the speech as a defining moment in the industry's understanding of leadership. Back at Whitman Enterprises, the cultural transformation solidified. Employees who had once felt overlooked found themselves thriving under a system that valued their contributions. Diana's quiet influence remained a constant reminder that true leadership comes from humility and service. Even those who had resisted the changes, like Elliot Carr's former allies, began to acknowledge the positive impact of the new culture. They saw firsthand how the company's renewed focus on respect and inclusion translated into tangible success, higher profits, lower turnover, and a stronger reputation in the industry. And as for Diana, she continued to move through the halls with the same quiet grace, her role as a cleaner unchanged, but her legacy undeniable. Months after the dramatic shift in Whitman Enterprises' culture, the company had not only stabilized but also flourished. However, growth always brings new challenges, and Jonathan and Diana found themselves navigating uncharted waters once again. A high-profile merger opportunity emerged with VistaCore Technologies, a company known for its innovation but infamous for its toxic workplace culture. The merger promised to propel Whitman Enterprises into the forefront of tech innovation, but it also threatened to disrupt the hard-won progress they had made internally. Jonathan was hesitant. He called a meeting with his executive team, including Mark Steele, Linda Chu, and the recently promoted Maria Alvarez, to discuss the risks. "VistaCore has the resources we need," Jonathan said, "but their culture is the opposite of what we've worked so hard to build. If we do this, we'll have to be relentless in integrating our values into theirs. It won't be easy." As the executives debated, Diana quietly observed. Though she wasn't formally part of the decision-making process, Jonathan valued her insights more than anyone's. That evening, over dinner at home, he asked her what she thought about the merger. Diana set down her fork and leaned back in her chair. "I think it's risky, but every big change is," she said. "The question is, do you believe in what we've built enough to make it stronger, even when it's tested?" Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. "I do. But what if their culture drags us down?" Diana smiled. "Then you remind them why your way works. You show them through actions, not just words. It's like cleaning a room. It takes time, but eventually the mess clears." The merger went through, and Whitman Enterprises acquired VistaCore Technologies. The transition was anything but smooth. Resistance from VistaCore employees was immediate, with many viewing Whitman's emphasis on respect and inclusion as superficial. Diana decided to take a more active role during the transition, stepping into VistaCore's headquarters for the first time. Dressed in her cleaning uniform, she began her usual work, quietly observing the dynamics of the new environment. She quickly noticed that employees avoided eye contact, spoke in hushed tones, and seemed perpetually on edge. It reminded her of the early days at Whitman Enterprises, before the cultural transformation. One afternoon, she struck up a conversation with James Turner, a senior engineer at VistaCore. "You seem tense," she said casually as she wiped down a nearby counter. James sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "It's just this place. You can't trust anyone here. Everyone's out for themselves." Diana nodded, her expression kind but firm. "That doesn't have to be the way. Sometimes it just takes one person to show others that trust is possible." James looked skeptical but intrigued. "Maybe," he said before returning to his work. Over the next few weeks, Diana became a familiar presence at VistaCore's headquarters. Though many employees were initially confused by her role, her unassuming demeanor and genuine interest in their experiences began to break down walls. She encouraged Jonathan and his executive team to implement some of the same programs that had transformed Whitman Enterprises, including the mentorship initiative and open forums. James Turner, the engineer she had spoken to, reluctantly joined the mentorship program, where he was paired with Maria Alvarez. Despite his initial skepticism, he quickly realized that Maria's collaborative approach was unlike anything he had experienced before. Under her guidance, James began to see the potential for change. Meanwhile, Diana continued to interact with VistaCore employees in her unique way. She left small notes of encouragement on desks, listened to employees' frustrations without judgment, and subtly modeled the respect and humility she hoped to see spread throughout the company. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they were undeniable. Employees who had once been cynical began to open up. Teams that had operated in silos started collaborating. Even the most resistant individuals couldn't deny the improved morale and productivity. One day, James approached Diana as she cleaned a conference room. "I didn't think it was possible," he admitted, "but things feel different here. Better." Diana smiled. "It's amazing what people can do when they feel seen and valued." As the merger solidified, Diana's role became even more significant. She wasn't just a symbol of the company's values. She was a living embodiment of their success. Employees from both Whitman Enterprises and VistaCore began sharing stories of how her presence had inspired them to see their work and each other differently. Jonathan, too, found himself relying on Diana more than ever. "You're the heart of this company," he told her one evening. "I don't know how we'd do this without you." Diana laughed softly. "You'd figure it out. But I'm glad to be here to help." With the merger complete and the culture transformed, Whitman Enterprises emerged stronger than ever. Diana continued her work as always, her quiet leadership leaving an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. The VistaCore employees, once skeptical, now embraced the values she had championed. And for Diana, the greatest reward was knowing that her actions had created a lasting impact, one that would shape the company for generations to come. The success of the Whitman-VistaCore merger seemed to signal a new era for the company. Profits soared, employee satisfaction reached record highs, and the company's reputation as a beacon of innovation and inclusion solidified. Yet, beneath the surface, a challenge was brewing, one that would test everything Jonathan and Diana had built. A rogue faction emerges. Within the remnants of VistaCore's old leadership, A small group of senior employees resented the changes. They viewed Whitman's culture as naive and unfit for the cutthroat tech industry. Led by Harold McCain, Vistacor's former COO, this faction began quietly undermining the integration process. Harold, a calculating strategist, used his influence to stoke doubts among both Whitman and Vistacor employees. He spread rumors about Jonathan's leadership, framed Diana's influence as undue interference, and hinted that the merger's long-term viability was shaky. Though his actions were subtle, the effects began to show. Departments that had started collaborating reverted to old silos, and employees who once embraced the new culture grew suspicious of their colleagues' motives. Diana sensed the shift almost immediately. While cleaning the executive offices one evening, she overheard fragments of a conversation between Harold and a disgruntled Whitman employee. "It's only a matter of time before the cracks start showing," Harold said. "People need a leader who understands the stakes, not someone caught up in lofty ideals." The words stuck with Diana. She didn't have all the details, but she knew Harold's tone well. It was the same dismissiveness she had faced countless times before. That night, she shared her concerns with Jonathan. "There's trouble brewing," she warned. "Someone's working to divide us, and if we don't act soon, we could lose everything we've worked for." Jonathan frowned, considering her words. "Do you think it's Harold?" Diana nodded. "He has the kind of ambition that doesn't care about consequences." Jonathan sighed. "Then we need to confront it head-on." Jonathan called a meeting with his most trusted executives, including Linda Chu, Mark Steele, and Maria Alvarez. Together, they devised a plan to root out the sabotage. Using internal audits, anonymous employee feedback, and careful monitoring of key departments, they began piecing together evidence of Harold's influence. Meanwhile, Diana played her own part. As someone who moved unnoticed through the company's halls, she gathered insights from employees who felt too intimidated to speak openly. "You'd be surprised what people will tell you when they think you're just passing through," she said with a knowing smile. The tension reached its peak during an all-hands company meeting. Jonathan had called the meeting to address growing concerns about the merger's stability, but Harold saw it as an opportunity to strike. As Jonathan began outlining the company's recent successes, Harold stood up, interrupting him. "With all due respect, Jonathan," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Not everyone agrees with the direction this company is taking." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Harold, who continued, "Your vision is admirable, but it's not sustainable. Employees are frustrated, departments are misaligned, and morale is slipping. We need stronger leadership that prioritizes results over ideals." Jonathan remained composed, but before he could respond, Diana stood up from her seat in the back of the room. Her presence commanded attention, and the murmurs in the crowd ceased. "Leadership isn't about tearing others down to build yourself up," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's about lifting people up so they can succeed together. What you're doing, Harold, isn't leadership, it's sabotage." Gasps rippled through the audience. Harold's confident facade faltered for a moment before he smirked. "And what qualifies you to make that judgment, Mrs. Moore?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Diana didn't flinch. "The same thing that qualifies every person in this room. I've worked hard, I've earned respect, and I've learned that true strength comes from collaboration, not division." Her words resonated deeply with the employees, many of whom began clapping and nodding in agreement. Jonathan seized the moment to present the evidence his team had gathered, exposing Harold's efforts to destabilize the company. The fallout was immediate. Harold's position within the company was terminated, and the employees who had been influenced by him began to distance themselves from his toxic rhetoric. Jonathan addressed the company once more, reinforcing the importance of unity and accountability. "This company is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet," Jonathan said. "It's a community of people who believe in something bigger than themselves. That's why we'll continue to thrive, because we stand together, even when it's hard." Diana's role in exposing Harold's sabotage became the stuff of legend within the company. Employees who had once underestimated her now saw her as the heart of Whitman Enterprises, a symbol of its resilience and integrity. The ousting of Harold McCain marked a pivotal moment for Whitman Enterprises, but the company's challenges weren't over. The fallout from Harold's sabotage had created fractures that wouldn't mend overnight. Employee trust, though bolstered by Jonathan and Diana's leadership, remained fragile. To secure the company's future, Jonathan proposed a bold move, an all-hands summit bringing together employees from both Whitman and Vistacor to reaffirm their shared values and chart a unified path forward. The summit was scheduled at a sprawling retreat center just outside Silicon Valley. The goal was ambitious. Through open dialogue, team-building exercises, and candid conversations, the company hoped to heal its divisions and strengthen its foundation. The first day of the summit opened with a keynote address by Jonathan. He spoke eloquently about the company's vision and the importance of resilience in the face of challenges. But it was the surprise announcement of Diana as a co-speaker that truly captivated the audience. As Diana stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She wore her usual cleaning uniform, a deliberate choice that carried an unspoken message about humility and authenticity. "Many of you know me as the woman who cleans these halls," she began, her voice calm but commanding. "And that's exactly who I am. But I'm also someone who believes in the power of people. I've seen the best and worst of us, and I know one thing for sure. We're stronger when we work together." Diana's words were simple but profound. She shared stories of her experiences, highlighting the importance of respect, collaboration, and seeing value in every role. "Titles don't define us," she said. "Our actions do." Her speech ended with a standing ovation, and even the most skeptical employees found themselves moved by her authenticity. The summit wasn't without its tensions. During a breakout session, a heated argument erupted between a group of Whitman employees and Vistacor holdovers. The topic was culture, specifically whether Whitman's emphasis on inclusion and collaboration made the company less competitive. "It's not that we don't value respect," argued Janet Wells, a former Vistacor project manager. "But sometimes you need to push people hard to get results. This kumbaya stuff doesn't work in the real world." Mark Steele, once a staunch advocate of a results-at-all-costs mentality, surprised everyone by stepping in. "I used to think like that," he admitted. "But then I realized something. When people feel respected, they perform better. They trust you, and that trust drives results. I've seen it happen here, and I know it can work for all of us." The conversation became a turning point for the summit. Employees from both sides began sharing their perspectives openly, finding common ground in their shared goals. The climax of the summit came on the last day, during a company-wide challenge designed to foster collaboration. Teams were tasked with solving a complex problem that required input from all departments: finance, engineering, marketing, and operations. Diana, observing from the sidelines, saw the exercise as a microcosm of the company's larger challenges. Some teams struggled with communication, while others excelled by leveraging their diverse strengths. One team, led by Maria Alvarez and James Turner, stood out for their innovative approach. They combined Maria's marketing expertise with James's technical knowledge to create a solution that impressed everyone, including Jonathan. At the end of the challenge, Jonathan addressed the employees. "What you achieved today is proof of what we can do when we work together. It's not about where you came from or what title you hold. It's about what we create as a team." Diana joined him on stage, adding, "This isn't just about a challenge. It's about how we face every obstacle as a company. Together, we can do more than survive. We can thrive." The summit ended on a high note, with employees leaving inspired and re-energized. The divisions that had once threatened the company's unity began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed commitment to Whitman's values. Back at the office, the results were evident. Teams collaborated more seamlessly, employee satisfaction soared, and the company's performance reached new heights. Even Vistacor employees who had resisted the changes admitted that Whitman's culture was unlike anything they had experienced before, and better. Diana, though still in her cleaning role, became a revered figure within the company. Employees sought her out not just for advice but for inspiration, seeing her as the embodiment of the values that made Whitman Enterprises thrive. Months after the summit, Whitman Enterprises had not only regained its footing, but emerged stronger than ever. The merger with Vistacor, once fraught with tension and skepticism, became a case study in how values-driven leadership could transform even the most divided organizations. The office hummed with a renewed energy. Departments that had once operated in silos now collaborated effortlessly. Employees who had doubted the company's direction began to see the tangible benefits of its inclusive culture. Productivity soared, and Whitman's latest product launch shattered sales records, solidifying its place as a leader in the tech industry. Diana continued her work, moving through the hallways with her usual quiet grace. Yet she was no longer just the cleaning lady in the corner. Employees greeted her warmly, often stopping to chat or seek her perspective. She had become the heart of the company, a symbol of resilience, humility, and the power of respect. One afternoon, as Diana was tidying up the break room, Maria Alvarez approached her with a smile. "You know, Mrs. Moore, you should have an office by now," she teased. Diana chuckled. "An office isn't where the real work happens," she replied. "I like being where the people are." In a surprise move, Jonathan announced the creation of the Diana Moore Leadership Scholarship, a program designed to support employees who demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities, regardless of their job titles or backgrounds. "This scholarship is a testament to the values my wife has embodied every day," Jonathan said during the launch event. "Leadership isn't about titles. It's about action, integrity, and lifting others up." The first recipients of the scholarship were announced at an all-hands meeting, and the impact was immediate. Employees across all levels of the company began nominating their peers, celebrating the unsung heroes whose contributions often went unnoticed. For Diana, the scholarship was deeply meaningful. "I never expected recognition," she said during the event. "But if this helps others see that every role matters, then it's worth it." As years passed, Whitman Enterprises continued to thrive, its culture becoming a model for companies around the world. The story of Diana Moore, the cleaning lady who taught a tech empire the true meaning of leadership, became the stuff of legend. Jonathan and Diana remained steadfast partners, both in life and in business. Though Diana never sought the spotlight, her actions left an indelible mark on the company and its people. One day, as she walked through the bustling office, a young intern stopped her. "Mrs. Moore," the intern said shyly, "can I ask you something? How did you change everything without ever raising your voice?" Diana smiled. "Sometimes you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to do the work and let it speak for itself." Years later, Whitman Enterprises stood as a shining example of what a company could achieve when it prioritized values as much as innovation. Its headquarters, now expanded into a state-of-the-art campus, bore subtle yet powerful reminders of its journey. In the central courtyard, a bronze plaque displayed a simple but profound quote, "Respect isn't a performance, it's a practice." Diana Moore. Diana's influence had outlived her daily presence at the company. Though she had officially retired, her legacy endured in every corner of Whitman Enterprises. Employees still shared stories about her, from her thoughtful advice to the small but impactful ways she had changed their perspectives. Diana and Jonathan, now enjoying a quieter life together, often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Over coffee on their porch one morning, Jonathan smiled at her. "You know," he said, "they still call you the soul of Whitman Enterprises." Diana chuckled. "I didn't set out to be anyone's soul. I just did what felt right." Jonathan reached for her hand. "And because of that, you changed everything." Diana Moore's story is a powerful reminder that leadership is about actions, respect, and lifting others up, no matter the role or title. Her journey inspires us to see value in every contribution and embrace the power of quiet, transformative leadership. What about you? Who inspires you with their resilience and dedication? How do you show respect and kindness in your daily life? If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share to spread the message of respect and the power of small actions to create big change. Let's celebrate the unsung heroes in our own lives, because everyone deserves to be seen and valued.